Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, we know everything, and it's going to be a lot on the Suns' plate this summer. A Kevin Durant trade, a Bradley Beal trade, reconfiguring and resetting the roster around Devin Booker to compete down the line. It's no easy task, but the biggest obstacle isn't a third team here or a draft pick there. Very clearly, from what the reports are already telling us, it's all about the second apron. I'll tell you why next.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Game Day Tuesday. Don't forget Locked On Suns, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Just click that follow or subscribe button. Do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become a dayer and get locked on to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Let's get right into it, folks. Ben is out today. I'm solo, as I'm sure you can already tell. And I am seeing a pattern as I watch the reports come out. Okay, as I fix the background, we're going to look at Bradley Beal. We're going to look at Kevin Durant. We're going to look at the draft, okay? But, because yes, they play the Warriors. You guys want me to preview that game? I don't think so, okay? But it's all going to center, because of the pattern I'm seeing, on the second apron. You look at what's coming out about Kevin Durant trade package. You look at what is coming out about just the Suns' overall vision and how they could retool this roster. And then, of course, Bradley Beal, where I will get to in just a moment. It is all talking money. If you remember, when the Suns acquired Beal, the buzzword, which I've referenced many times on this podcast, was blowing through the second apron. That is what Matt Ishbia said on the record to Brian Windhorst of ESPN back at that time. We're blowing through the second apron. We don't care that it exists. We don't care that this collective bargaining agreement snuck up on us after I wanted Kevin Durant, right? That's Matt Ishbia talking. We're blowing through it. Consequences be damned. Well, that's nice in theory when you push the Nuggets to 6 games and you're feeling pretty and sitting pretty and feeling good about yourself, but it's a lot different when you underperform and don't even make the 10 seed. Can't really keep blowing through all of these consequences when you're in that situation, and so that is what you're hearing. The Suns are in a situation now with Bradley Beal where it is untenable to bring him back. He went 6 quarters without making a field goal. When he came back this past weekend, he is giving very, very, insensitive sounds like it's disrespectful or something, but like absurd comments about making a run and I'm smiling and this and that, just totally tone deaf. And I just don't see a pathway for him being on this team next year. And so you start to get creative, right? And we talked about it a couple weeks back, stretching Bradley Beal, taking the $110 million left on his contract, which includes a player option that, of course, he would opt into, and you stretch it over the amount of years times 2 plus 1, which gets you to 5, right? 5 years, over $110 million. That's $22 million a year. Since then, there's some rules in place that we have not circled back on. And so Bobby Marks joined Arizona Sports this morning and basically explained the whole thing. I'm going to play the audio of that clip because it had some footage of games that I don't want YouTube to flag on this channel. So you'll just see my face thinking along to the clip as Kellen Olson asks the question and Bobby Marks explains it. But listen very closely. It's only about a minute, and then we'll get into what it could mean for this Suns team the rest of the summer.
The avenue to use your exceptions. You're no longer in the apron anymore. You can aggregate contracts. There's just a lot of different. Instead of having basically the Kevin Durant, loan option of trying to fix this, that gives you, hey, maybe we don't have to keep, as I said, Durant. Maybe we can add in trades and everything like that. So I think that's the biggest one. Certainly Durant, as you said, is a big one. But I think that figuring out what you do with Beal, just because that basically sets the tone as far as for free agency and the draft and what you can do with trades.
To go back to Beal and just sort of the possibilities that they could have in terms of moving on from him, could you provide a little bit more detail on us in terms of a buyout or just cutting him, what that sort of would look like in that situation when they would let him go?
Yeah, so, you have until the end of August if you wanted to do a waive and stretch with him. But, basically he's got 2 years left. You can waive him, but you can't waive and stretch him right now without him agreeing to a buyout, because how the cap rules are is that the stretch money can't exceed 15% of the salary cap, and his stretch money is like 23 million, and that's more. So basically any type of buyout that you're looking for him to take, would he take 20 to 25 million off what's owed to him? Because then that would allow him maybe to go out and get the, $14 million non-taxable level if it's available to him. So that.
Think of it like any buyout, okay? What do we see each March? I don't even think there was that really a big one at all in the league this year, but Ben Simmons, perfect example, right? He goes to the Clippers, he gets bought out. What happens? Well, usually it doesn't even get reported a lot of the time, but typically it's just customary that the player will give back. That's always the wording we hear, right? The amount of money that they're about to get from the team that they're going to go sign with in the buyout market, right? It's not actually this number because it's March by then, so it's like a prorated smaller amount. But if you think like Simmons was making 30 million or so, 25, whatever, the minimum is about 2.5. He gives back 2.5 million to the Nets, and then the Clippers just give that to him. It's no different for him, and the team comes out feeling okay, right? So when you hear that with Beal, the rule is the amount of money, the 22 million that he would be owed if you just stretched him, that breaks a rule in the league about dead money. So instead, what Bobby Marks is suggesting is exactly that type of thing that we see every year with the buyout, only on a much, much bigger scale, an unprecedented scale in the league. But you would be talking about Bradley Beal is still a serviceable player. The injuries, the cost that it took the Suns to acquire him, and of course, the level of expectation when he's making that amount of money and everything else that he had with this group have made him a disappointment here. But if you're a rebuilding type of team or a team trying to take a next step and you need a little bit of scoring punch, Bradley Beal, as Bobby Marks suggested, on like a mid-level exception, 15, whatever, that's not that big of a deal. That's probably closer to in line with what his value actually is. And so if he can go ahead and get that contract, and of course this is all like happening at once through the grapevine, it's a moving target. But if he, and as Bobby Marks said, like you can do the buyout at any point, right? So you can do the stretch at any point until August, I think, but this would all happen before August. He can put out some feelers and say, okay, X, Y, and Z teams would be interested in giving me the mid-level, if not more. I mean, who knows? But let's just say the mid-level, because not a lot of teams have cap space these days. I'm going to get the mid-level over 2 years. So that's going to give me, close to $30 million guaranteed. Let's call it $27 million guaranteed. Well, I'll give the Suns back $27 total million in the buyout. And if you think $110 million, you cut 27 off of that, you're down to, what is that, 83? Well, now you're dividing 83 by 5 years. And that gets you to the number that Bobby Marks just said, closer to that $17 million range. And that doesn't break the rules about dead money, but it still gets the Suns, I believe, straight up under cutting 33 million or whatever off of Beal's salary. That in and of itself might get the Suns under the second apron, but if not, it gets you obviously a lot closer. That is how desperate the Suns are, right? Not only to get off of Beal, which they're desperate. I mean, there's no need to have Beal on a team next year if you bring in, a young guard and you're trying to develop him, or you just want to change the outlook of your team a little bit and clean house. That's all important. But the amount it's going to cost you to trade Beal, if it's even possible at all, might be untenable. And it is that important for the Suns to get under the second apron first and foremost that they could be. And of course, like Matt Ishbia hasn't come out and released some kind of statement or tweet saying, yes, this is what we're doing. They're going to explore the trade market first. But when it comes down to it, this is what we are looking at because of the constraints of the second apron. The fact that if you keep Beal on the team, you are locked into trade limitations, draft limitations, which we'll talk about at the end of this show, mid-level exceptions, buyout players, all the stuff we've been talking about for years now is not going to be, it's not going to fly in a situation where you aren't just trying to win a title and blowing through that second apron, as Matt Ishbia said. And so you're now talking about Matt Ishbia potentially eating $85 million if he can get Beal to agree to this, right? That is, I mean, it's unreal. It's crazy, but that's where the Suns are. And do not be surprised if, because of their desperation, that is exactly where this ends up. The second apron, financial considerations will also be very central to the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. So we'll talk about the latest on that side of the Suns roster coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average, meaning the perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. All right, let's keep the show rolling here. Don't forget to sign up for the Locked On Suns daily newsletter if you have not already at LockedOnDaily.com. Stay up to date throughout the playoffs and the offseason with the NBA Suns news that you need, all in one place. Free for you, supports the show big time. All right, so let's get to it, right? We have gotten very little concrete information about Kevin Durant's suitors, right? And like what everybody's sort of saying now, and I tend to agree, is like wait for the postseason, right? If Minnesota or the Knicks or, you know, I guess that might be it, the Rockets in terms of the teams that are actually in the playoffs, if they underperform, anything's on the table. If the Miami Heat don't even make the playoffs at all, if the Spurs, you know, figure out their coaching situation, they don't get lottery luck, and they're in the mix, you know, a lot that will decide the Kevin Durant situation from the other team's side is still very much up in the air. But Brian Windhorst provided a little bit of clarity as to what the Suns side might look like today, and I'm going to throw a couple of photos from his article up onto the screen as I read them here. First, he said, quote, "Do the Suns want to trade Kevin Durant this summer? No, not really. But the reality is that the Suns' pathways of getting out of the second apron, ding, 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 keep that buzzword in mind as I continue here, to ensure they have flexibility all seem to lead to Durant. They can't trade Beal and won't trade Devin Booker. That is why at the trade deadline, the Suns held talks with a handful of teams about Durant trades, conversations that are likely to lead to action this summer. One of the reasons there wasn't a Durant trade in February, other than Durant himself making it clear that he didn't want one, is that the Suns were looking for a massive haul in return per sources." Okay, continuing. "Regardless of how much Durant has left in the tank, that might not be in the cards. Durant will be 37 years old, and while he's absolutely still worth the $55 million he will earn next season, the 2-year, $120 million max extension he may be looking for might not attract suitors." Brian Windhorst went on to write, "The Suns arrived at a crossroads where they have to move Durant. They might have to make a decision between getting what they want, which is a beautiful package of players and draft capital, and settling for what they need. which is flexibility. And he references the Paul George decision by the Clippers to just let him walk when he wouldn't accept their lower, lesser offer than the max he got from Philly. So, I mentioned this, right? When we were talking about, when I did the solo episode last week and I was talking about the different KD packages, I said, I can tell you what might be the best in a vacuum, but I mentioned the other team's apron situations, of course, as important factors, like the Knicks are up against it, the Heat are already in that situation, and the Timberwolves are in the over the second apron as well. But the other thing I said is, hey, there's going to be this weird disparity where the teams that have the most financial flexibility to get a deal done, like San Antonio, for instance, or even Houston, their packages might be a little bit more future-oriented than like the Timberwolves, for instance, where they could give you multiple rotation caliber players right away. The Spurs their package is going to be based around picks, but they have the type of package the type of flexibility that can allow the Suns to execute the type of trade that they might want to make and get as much money off their books as they possibly can. That might include, hey, could you get Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal to be part of that trade? Maybe they don't go to the Spurs with KD, but maybe they go somewhere else. Same could be said for Houston, right? And so that's kind of where we're headed. It's going to be very fascinating. I don't have a prediction. I don't know what this means, but what I am saying is that whether it's Bobby Marks now or Brian Windhorst or even what John Gambadoro has kind of hinted at locally here, the money is going to play a major role in what the Suns want to do. So you might look and say, hey, I like Jaden McDaniels. Put Jaden McDaniels next to Book and Ryan Dunn and, a couple of other guys you get along the way. Maybe somebody in the draft this year. Maybe, you get a vet in a Allen or O'Neal deal. Maybe you keep those guys. That sounds fun. Maybe it does. But what I would tell you is the deal that makes the most sense on paper or from just a talent standpoint, that might not be the deal that the Suns are most attracted to from a financial situation. Now, at the same time, let me just say this, right? I don't think that the Suns are going to pursue a straight-up rebuild. Like a straight-up where the roster is just carved out. You get some like Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson as the players back from the Spurs. You flip Grayson Allen for a pick. You flip Royce O'Neal for some seconds. You buy Beal out. You take a pick at 29 and you roll into next season with the least talented roster Booker has had since like before McHale and Ayton got here. I don't think that that's happening, right? I don't think that would make a lot of sense. Booker has said he's not going to be part of a rebuild. I don't think it's in Matt Ishbia's nature to do this. But this needs to at least be another factor, right? There's the what does KD want? There's the, what players are you getting back? What picks are you getting back? Equally important now, I think we need to be honest, is where does X trade leave the Suns when it comes to the luxury tax and the aprons? It has to be a focal point of what we're talking about. Because you do look at the Clippers, the Bogdan Bogdanovic trade, or, I think that the Terrence Mann trade, I guess that was the same one that they made. Getting Ben Simmons. I mean, he's not even that big of a deal, but, whatever they might look to do this summer where you're kind of hear them on the edges of like, hey, could they be the team to go get whatever superstar becomes available? All of that is only possible for the Clippers because they let Paul George walk and they have a little bit more flexibility, right? The Nuggets, obviously, with KCP, we talked a lot about it. Are they exactly regretting that? Maybe. But it seems like the teams that have made smart but intelligent moves to skirt this stuff have proven to be more right than the teams who just said F it. And I think the Suns might be done saying F it. We haven't even gotten to one of the main reasons that they might be done saying that, but I'll tell you what that is next. First, today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health, but traditional in-person therapy can be expensive, often getting to as much as $250 a session, and that's where BetterHelp comes in. With online therapy, you get quality care at a price that makes sense, saving you time and money. Therapy is not just for life's toughest moments, those emergencies, those extreme situations. No, it can help with everyday stress, learning how to set boundaries, or even just developing positive coping skills to get through the day. Having access to support when you need it can make a big difference, and your well-being is worth it. So visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, let's close out the show. I know I've done a version of this segment for many times. I know I have, because it doesn't matter until all of a sudden it does. Okay, I might have even brought it up a touch around the trade deadline. And that's kind of when this next thing I want to hit locked into place. And that is frozen draft picks. Okay, that get used to hearing about that term, because as soon as next week, it is going to be a news talking point around the NBA. What a frozen pick is that on the day after the final day of the regular season, if a team is over the second apron, typically what happens the day after the last day of the regular season is the first round pick 7 years out becomes available, right? Like we were talking about when Ben was on yesterday, we were talking about the Knicks package in the trade, in a potential KD trade. And I said, hey, that 2032 draft pick, that will become available over the summer, and I believe that they can trade that. In this case, if you're over the second apron, what happens is on that day, the pick becomes frozen, meaning it cannot be traded, and it is locked into place at the end of the first round. Okay? Now, that is a given for the Suns. There's no way around that at this point, because obviously you can't make any deals until the summer. So the Suns are it's a given that they are going to be next Monday over the second apron. There's nothing they can do about that. They would, we're talking about all this Beal stretching and stuff. That all would help, but it can't do anything about April 14th, right? So the Suns draft pick is going to be frozen. But there is hope, okay? I'll read from this CBS article from Sam Quinn. From that point, a 4-year clock begins. If the team finishes below the second apron in at least 3 of the following 4 years going forward, the pick becomes unfrozen once they get to that point. If they don't do that, if the team finishes above the second apron in at least 2 of those next seasons, the frozen pick remains frozen. So here's the deal. Here's what that means. The Suns' first-round pick in 2032 will be frozen, untradeable, and locked into the end of the round, the first round, for at least 3 years, right? That means they can't use it in a trade to go get Kevin Durant, for instance. They can't use it for any of that stuff to split into 3 the way that they did, for instance, this past year with the Charlotte trade that they made, or Utah trade that they made, right? They can get under the second apron for the next 3 seasons, and then it would unfreeze, and they would get access to trading it again, and then by the time 2032 rolls around, if they did still have that pick for some reason, then it would no longer be locked into place at the end of the first round. It would be whenever their record tells you it should be. Got it? Not exactly easy to keep track of, but I think I explained it pretty well there, and shout out to Sam Quinn over at CBS for explaining this, right? That's the situation that we're in, right? So that is another reason to reset that clock as soon as you possibly can, because put it another way right here, you got to get under it 3 of the next 4 seasons. If the Suns don't go to extreme lengths to get rid of Bradley Beal's money, if they do keep Kevin Durant and can't simultaneously keep him and dip, wow, I'm just leaving it, guys. Have at it in the comments. Dip back under it in the next season with KD, then that means they have to dip under it the next 3, or the picks for, you know what I mean? Or I guess by the next season and all the next 3 after that to get the pick unfrozen in the first place. Like that is how dire it is. And like, I don't think the frozen at the end of the first round part really is all that big of a deal, because it's kind of the same thing as like when you end up trading the pick, right? Sometimes you end up being really bad. You don't have the pick. Wah, it sucks. You don't get to keep your 3rd overall pick because you were not smart about your trades and whatever. That happens. To me, the bigger problem is the not being able to trade it part, right? Now, you could say, okay, well, then you just wait the next summer and you get access to the 2033 pick. And then if you're under the apron and that one doesn't get frozen, you just have access to that. And that's true. But it's just another limiting factor that you want to try to avoid. And the NBA has created a loophole, basically a wiggle room for teams to fix their problem, fix their mistake. And so it just adds to the desperation, the word I've said multiple times already on this podcast, that I think the Suns are certainly going to face to use this offseason and the moves that are already set out in front of them to kind of peel back this big 3, deconstruct this roster, and at the same time take a step toward getting that financial relief that they desperately need. It will matter. It will come up. Get used to saying frozen picks and second apron even more this summer, I think, than you have all of the summers, the 2 before this, where it was coming into effect. Now they're going to be getting out of the wrath of the second apron, but how they do it and how quickly they can do it and what exactly that looks like, that's what the offseason is going to be all about. Hit follow or subscribe if you have not already. We got a home back-to-back, the last one of the season, to not wrap up the week, but that's coming your way. So keep it right here. There will inevitably be more news. Heck, maybe we'll talk, hey, is there a Warriors KD package? Can Jimmy Butler come back? I mean, whatever. I don't know. You never know. Maybe Book goes off. That would be nice. Either way, enjoy the game. We'll talk to you later.